Hi, Erin. Welcome to the Seasons of Motherhood series today.
Hi, thank you.
So happy to have you here. I mean, we've had so many different conversations on the couch, outside, by the pool, on walks. So it's kind of funny to be on Zoom together, but it's actually a great way because we have this opportunity to share a bit of your story with for other moms to see your experience. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about time that you wrote in your blog. And it's a beautiful topic because I think every mom can resonate with the fact that you need more time. So just before we get into your blog and some of the questions and talking back and forth, I'm just going to introduce you so people have a little bit of a background to know who you are. So we have Erin Tee here. She is a stay-at-home mother. She's been married for 16 years. I forgot that you'd been married 16 years.
Doesn't feel like that long.
I know, it just kind of flies by. And she's married to Daniel. They have 4 children, ages 14 down to 3, and they have been homeschooling since the beginning, which we will talk about more a little bit. She graduated from Sheridan College, specializing in electronic technology, working in audio, video installation and repairs, beyond my scope of reasoning there. She's passionate about music, playing the flute, piano, guitar, and bass. I didn't know the bass part. I knew about guitar, but I'm like, when I read that, I'm like, I forgot she could do that. So you participate a lot in your church worship, and you're very involved in your church, which is beautiful, leading worship and different musical things, and occasionally speaking at different ladies' events. And you attend Heritage Grace in Woolwich County, which is actually quite new for you because you just moved your family from one place to the next, which is probably a whole other blog.
Yeah.
Whole other discussion. But I'm so happy that you're here today. So maybe we can start off by talking about a little bit of how time has unfolded into your life in unique ways, and maybe the lack of time and time just as a mom and a homeschooling mom, because that word time is really big to people because we're always looking for time, more time. We don't have enough time. And so how has that kind of unfolded into your life as a stay-at-home mom and a homeschooling mom?
I think the biggest way, I've got to say how I've been surprised by how God works with my time, which shouldn't surprise me. He never wastes time. He doesn't. Every moment that we've lived throughout our life and our experience, he doesn't waste it.
Right.
He can use it for good. He can turn it for good. He can replenish us even when we give him our time.
Right.
So that's what I've seen in more recent years, and what has surprised me in more recent years. That when I serve, when I offer my time at church ministries, and sometimes it feels like a sacrifice, when I give my time to regularly attending church, Sunday services, and small groups, I leave feeling so refreshed and rejuvenated, as if I needed it.
Right.
I didn't think I had the time for it, but God knew I needed it.
Right.
And I think the other thing that we need to remember is, well, for some of us, we'd probably prefer being a hermit. We'd like to just hide out in our little shell, but it doesn't glorify God, and it doesn't benefit anyone.
No.
And you need to remember that God will equip you with what you need. He'll strengthen you with what you need. So that we can touch other people's lives, so that they can touch ours. God wants our time, and he's going to use it. He's going to bless us because of it. He's going to bless other people because of it. We have to remember that.
Yeah, no, it's such a great reminder today, because I think the first thing to go is something as important as Sunday worship or community. And we let it go because we just don't have time, because we didn't finish everything we wanted to finish from Monday to Saturday. And probably very similar to the way I grew up, knowing Sundays was special. It was important. It's just what we did. You got up, we got ready for church, we went to church, we had lunch, we spent time together as a family. And I still think that happens today, but it seems to be a little more rare because of our busyness and overscheduling, and kind of like that homeschool mom, the lie that sits on your shoulder, I didn't get enough during the week, and we just can't go to this one program now at church because we didn't accomplish A, B, and C. And I know you can relate, because I know I feel the same way. For sure. So maybe let's go back almost to the beginning, because this all ties in with time anyway. But when you started to think about kids and then homeschooling, time was already there because you didn't have time. You have babies, you had little ones. You're like, how could I bring in homeschooling? But yet you homeschooled right from the beginning. So can you maybe take us back to a little bit of that initial decision and what that looked like for you and for Daniel?
Yeah, I think it surprised me. It wasn't on my radar. We had children and I never thought I would homeschool. I never thought I was equipped to do it. I didn't think I was capable. The thought of homeschooling scared me.
I agree.
But yeah, I fell into it. Like Daniel was the one who initially planted the seed of idea. I think it was God who planted the seed.
Yes.
Like he was the one who brought it forward.
Right.
And it was so much better that we started from the start because I was already teaching my children. Like you're teaching them how to walk and talk and eat and play and discover. And then it became kindergarten. And then it was grade 1. And then it was grade 5. So you're growing with them and you're learning with them. And God's equipping you along the way.
So true.
So I think for us, the best thing we could have done was to start right from the beginning.
That's amazing.
For other people, it could be completely different.
Right.
But he equips us for what we need.
Yeah,
For us,
absolutely.
kindergarten is where we had to start.
Yes, he does. A lot of people are scared to take that step. I know I felt the same way too when we were first starting in that first nudge of, what do you mean? I didn't go to university for this. I went to school to be a teacher and I'm going to put my kids in Christian school and I have a plan. This is what I want to do. I know what my goal is. And then God was like, I think I'm going to take you on this path. And so and we've talked about this before, but Duncan and I, we took some time to really think it through. And a lot of people think, okay, 1 year at a time. But really, it is always one day at a time. Even if you've decided to homeschool between now and the end of high school, you still have to take it one day at a time. One day at a time, right? Otherwise, it becomes such a large step that you become fearful and then you just kind of give up. And that's not what God wants us to do. No. All right, so I'm going to read a quote here from your blog post. You said, when my children were still small, I constantly felt so deflated, attempting in vain to cling to my own schedule, my time, the old way of doing things, my old self. I felt like my identity was slipping away as I was becoming merely an extension of my children's needs. And when I read that, I'm like, oh, I totally get that. And I thought so many moms are going to go, yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that. When they were small, feeling deflated, you're scheduling your time and your identity slipping away. What did that look like for you at that stage?
Yeah, I think for a lot of moms, for me, I had a full-time job. I was rewarded for my job. I worked hard and I was satisfied. I had time for music, for studying instruments, for church and involvement. I had time for me, and that was my identity. That was how I was gratified, and then children came, and it was like I had to sacrifice everything. I no longer. There were days when I felt like I wasn't even human. I was just literally an extension of my. Yes. And it's really exhausting when you're trying so hard to cling to who you were, and then you have this newness in front of you that demands so much more of you. It was so hard, but the moment I learned how to simply release it to God, to say, okay, God, I'm sacrificing my needs. I'm sacrificing what I want for your glory, and you just lead me. And it was incredibly freeing. And that is why I often say that as a tip to other new moms or expecting parents who say, "Oh, give me a tip." It's like, prepare for sacrifice, and be willing to sacrifice, and you will feel so much better.
Yes. Oh my goodness, absolutely. And then you say here, we're left with a lingering question. Where does a busy homeschool mom who jumps from teaching to cooking to cleaning to bedtime battles find me time? So talk to me about, and everybody watching, how have you found that me time, and how has God redeemed your time? And I felt like they were really, those two were kind of connected together.
Yeah. practical ways of finding me time, I learned how to literally chisel my time out in the calendar, like take a chisel,
Yeah.
carve out time, even just half an hour twice a week can be so rejuvenating if you're doing something that you love in that short amount of time. I do feel like in some ways God extended some of those times. Like for me, the one thing I love is just worshiping with my piano and singing. So I'll kind of learn how to play songs really fast.
That's good.
But it was, in that time, that's what God knew I needed. So I was able to feel so rejuvenated. I was able to get through lots of songs to find time of worship and quiet and prayer. And it was a half hour. And I could keep going. Secondly, you can find peace and restoration with the relationships and the people that you're with.
Right.
Sometimes for introverts, we kind of think the only time we can feel rejuvenated is when we're alone. But you can find peace and rejuvenating moments when you're with people sharing a coffee, when you're with your children reading stories, saying those little bedtimes, participating in their magic tricks and their silly jokes.
Yes.
It's joyful and you feel rejuvenated by it.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. I love that perspective of just looking at your little moments in the day instead of wondering what's my big moment for me later. And you're finding it in the little moments. And it's actually not only feeding you, but it's actually feeding and blessing your kids. So that's a really, really beautiful perspective. I really love it.
One more thing that would be very practical that helped me was finding peace in the daily chores, which sounds crazy, but at 10 o'clock at night, I would put on a podcast that was encouraging, or I'd put on some worship music. I'd have it in my ears so I wouldn't wake up my kids. And I would just clean, I'd do all the chores. And by the end of it, my kitchen would be sparkling because I'd be so happy with my podcast. I wouldn't want to stop. And I'd feel proud of the work I had done, but I'd also feel encouraged and ready for a good night's sleep.
Right.
So those are my practical tips on how to use the teeny bit of time that you have.
Right.
I think women, moms, we need to remember to choose to find joy and peace in every given moment. We need to choose to look for Jesus because he's there. Right. He's with us. Right?
Yes.
So just choose to set your eyes on him, to find him in those moments, to ask him where he is.
Right.
He'll show up. He's faithful.
Does. Yes, he is. Absolutely. And I think it's really important too that your spouse, in your case, obviously Daniel, that he understands what your needs are and that you're communicating so that you're on the same page, so he sees how much you need at this particular time compared to maybe another time. And I know that even with Duncan and I, he knew that I needed to go out with friends. And that was important to me, to separate being a mom, being at home all day with 5 kids, to being a friend or going out with my sister or my mom or my sister-in-law or something like that. And he always said, you come back so refreshed. And it became a good thing for everybody because I was ready, And so when you say you're being refreshed, even just in the cleaning, that's a beautiful choice. And you're ready for the next day and you're refreshed. And I think it's important. And I think a lot of women think, well, I shouldn't have any me time and I shouldn't be taking care of myself. But self-care is really, really important because if we can't care for ourselves, we can't care for our family that's there that needs us every day, all the time, no matter what age, no matter if they're 3 years old or they're 19 years old, you still need to be fueling yourself. So I really appreciate what you said about that for sure. You talk about James 1:17. Do you remember talking about that in the vlog? How you talked about every good gift. Why did you choose that verse in particular? Because I love that verse. It's a beautiful verse. It was actually the verse that we used when we did baby announcements back in the day, the actual paper ones that you mailed to people. That was actually Jack's. So I love that verse. I'm like, oh, I love that verse so much, that every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above. So talk about that verse a little bit with you.
That was the verse that popped into my head. The moment you mentioned the idea of me writing a blog, I knew it was going to be about time. And the only verse that kept filtering through was that verse.
Mm.
And at first I didn't know how it connected. I'm like, it has nothing to do with time. Why is this the verse I'm thinking about? But I realized, well, I I don't know how to connect it, but when we see the world, I guess that's where it connects. When we see the world through Jesus's lens, and we see that everything he's given us is a gift, that he's bestowed upon us abundantly, all these precious and beautiful gifts. It just changes our perspective when we recognize that Satan wants nothing more than to just destroy and to deceive and to remove and strip away all these blessings that God has given us, to cloak them in darkness, to make them seem like burdens and hindrances and frustrations. Like, that's what he wants.
Yes.
And then the truth is, Satan is just distorting these beautiful gifts that God has given us. And these are the gifts that we can invest our time in. Right.
Yeah. I think you probably can relate to, over the years, you don't want to see your kids as an interruption. When you're in the middle of something and they come in and they need you, or they're crying, or they're hurt, or they're like, whatever it might be, you have to literally choose in that moment. You're not an interruption. You're a part of this moment. And I'm welcoming you in. And I can fully admit as a mom that I would see that as an interruption. And I was frustrated, or I was irritated because it was me. I was on the phone, or I was doing something. But when we see it through the lens of Jesus, just like you said, I think that changes everything. I think that's so beautiful. Maybe just before we close, is there a word of encouragement that you could give to a mom today? I mean, I know you've said so much already to encourage them, but maybe there's just something that you can leave with them today, just to bless a mom that might be watching.
I think Lamentations 3:23. The Lord's love never ceases. His mercies are new every morning. That as moms, I think so often we feel like we just fail. We fail and fail and fail. And we look at the future of our children and we think we've broken them. But God's mercies are new every morning. He never fails. His love upon us and our family never comes to an end. No. Just hold tight to that verse. Extend yourself grace and forgiveness, the grace and forgiveness that Jesus is extending to you. Right. And rise up in the morning and say, this is a new day with new mercies. Yeah. Just cling to that verse.
No, it's beautiful. He goes before us. He knows the plan before we do. And we truly, fully need to trust him and allow him to be the one who guides us every day. And because he directs our paths ultimately. And so I love what you said today about time. It's been an encouragement to me. And I know it's going to be an encouragement to so many other moms, because time is something we all think about all the time. But when we put it in his hands, it becomes his time, and he will use us, just like you talked about, in the small ways. So thank you so much, Erin, for sharing your heart today. And so for everybody here that's listening today, I encourage you to go to her blog so you can read more about it in a little more detail and see what she has learned over the years. And I thank you, God, so much for Erin, and I thank you for you. I just pray big blessing on you and your family. Thank you for sharing today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. We'll talk very soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.